Hi everybody, welcome to Mark's 900. I'm Mark and today I'm going to swap out the rear brake pads on this Z900. Why? Well, it's done 13,000 miles and the manual says, page 151, if your brake pads are lower than 1.5 millimeters, then it's time to change them. Well, I can see into these brake pads, so I can see exactly how much friction material's left on the pad. It's not an awful lot, it's definitely less than 1.5 millimeter. I don't need to measure it. So I've got myself some EBC brake pads. These are the HH Sintered brake pads, the same as I put on the front. Now when I did the front ones, I didn't do a brake test, so I'm going to do a brake test on this bike. And what I've done is I've just been out for a ride and I filmed myself doing a stop from 30 miles an hour to see how good the old Kawasaki brakes are, and then we'll try it with these as well. So first off then, let's get these pads swapped out. Okay, gloves on. This is a fairly straightforward job. I'm going to need an 8mm socket, which will take this retaining pin out of there. And then there's a 12mm socket, which I need on there. That enables me to tilt the caliper back and then see inside. What I might also do is take a 14mm socket, put it on there, and undo that one as well, which enables me to take the whole of the caliper off, so I can have a good look inside, make sure the pistons are operating correctly and all that sort of thing. Right, so I'm going to crack on and do that. As I say, gloves are on, old jeans on. It's not really a messy job, but let's do it. You don't actually think I'm going to let you watch me do all this, do you? Now, there are plenty of people on YouTube that know exactly what they're doing, and you don't want to be watching me do it. So we'll come back when I've got these pads off. Right, so the pads are off. I think that took me less than a minute. So literally take these two bolts out and that's it. Caliper lifts up, these come out. I can see the spring in there as well, the retaining spring, which just stops all the brake squeal. That looks okay. The piston's right the way out. I'm going to give that a good clean before I push it back in, get everything cleaned up around there. Actually, it's not that dirty in there, to be fair. So I'm just not going to take that other bolt out as well. I'll leave that one in. I'll just check that it moves okay, and there's plenty of free movement there. Everything's looking good, nothing's seized, so that's good news. And I wouldn't expect it to be fair. These are very close. They're not quite as low as I thought they would be, but they are very close to being at the edge of the limiter. Certainly on one side it seems to be wearing a little bit more than the other. I'll just see if I can work out why that is. It might just be a natural thing of having a single piston. Right, so I'll just very quickly show you those. Now, before I bang the new set on, I'm just going to make sure that they are exactly the same, just overlaying them on there in case I have to send them back, and in fact these are exactly the right ones. So those are for the bin. I can see that they've had copper grease on the back of them before. That's a big question, isn't it, whether to grease or not with bike brakes. Look at the difference in how much you get in on a new brake. Okay, there we go, job done. I got the new pads onto the bike. Now all I needed was an 8mm socket and a 12mm socket, pulled the old ones out, and then I greased up the new ones and put them on. Now the new ones have got brake, this is brake grease, which I've got on the back of the pads. Okay, so it's called metal-free permanent lubricant for disc brakes, so that is the proper stuff to put on the back of your brake pads as far as I'm aware. And I used copper grease on the bolts that go through, just to stop them seizing. Other than that, things to look out for, inside there is a metal clip which stops the brake squeal, and there's also another metal clip which is at the back there. Just make sure you see where those are seated, because they do have a habit of just falling out and you have to push them back in and make sure they're in the right position. So that bit was a little bit awkward. Well, I was cut off in my prime there, mainly because someone decided to start trimming a hedge with a tractor, which doesn't make for a great soundtrack. Anyway, there wasn't much else to say other than putting the new pads in was a little bit fiddly because of the metal retainers that keep on popping out. In fact, I had to refit them twice, so see the outtakes at the end if you don't mind a bit of bad language. So it was just a case of pump the brake a few times to engage the new pads to the rotor, and then I went off and I rode the bike around doing lots of back braking, both slow and fast, to get them bedded in. They didn't take long before they felt like they were working exactly as they should be, a good positive feel on the back brake, and it slowed the bike down as it should. Now, I mentioned ABS because I've never really consciously tried to use it on a bike. I have in the car on an icy road to see how it works, but never on a bike, and it did make me wonder if I've actually got ABS on the back wheel as well as on the front. Now that might sound like a daft question, but it doesn't say ABS anywhere on the back, whereas it clearly does on the front. So I had a quick look at the brake pipes and I could see that they lead into the ABS box, which means that they should work on the back as well. Well, theoretically anyway. But as a last resort, I actually checked the manual. Now, to save you digging it out for yourself, here are some surprising ABS revelations from page 111 in the section called How to Ride Your Motorcycle, a section which I should probably have read about 2 years ago when I bought the bike. Right, so it says that ABS is designed to help prevent the wheels from locking up when the brakes are applied hard while running in a straight line. So that's good news, that's exactly what I thought they were for. And then it goes on to give us a number of bullet points about what we should and shouldn't be doing. So it says to apply the brake effectively, use the front brake lever and the rear brake pedal simultaneously. Well, that's good advice, that's what I do anyway. ABS cannot compensate for adverse road conditions, misjudgment or improper application of brakes. You must take the same care as with motorcycles not equipped with ABS. So again, I think that's pretty good advice. And then it goes on to say, ABS is not designed to shorten the braking distance. On loose, uneven or downhill surfaces, the stopping distance of a motorcycle with ABS may be longer than that of an equivalent motorcycle without it. Use special caution in these areas. Well, I thought that was what it was supposed to help with, but there we are. ABS will help prevent wheel lockup when braking in a straight line, good, but it cannot control wheel slip, which may be caused when braking during cornering. Well, that's news. Same as conventional braking system, and excessive sudden braking may cause wheel lockup. So I thought it was supposed to stop wheel lockup, but it's saying you can still get it. And during braking, ABS will not prevent the rear wheel from lifting. Again, I thought that's what it was for. Right, so anyway, so there's a few things about ABS in there that I didn't know. And then there's a couple of warnings. One is that ABS cannot protect the rider from all possible hazards, and it is not a substitute for safe riding practices. Well, that's good advice. And then it gives us a bunch of warnings about use the correct tyres. So there we are. Armed with this new knowledge of ABS, it's time to head off to my test area and test the old brake pads first. Here we are on this lovely quiet road that doesn't go anywhere and has this dual carriageway running over the top of it. Great news for me because there's no traffic, the road is really dry under here. I have the pillars as reference points. I can stick my old GoPro up here on a tripod and just leave it up there. So I'm going to go and get up the road, come towards this at 30 miles an hour. When I hit my marker on the left, I'll slap on the back brake. Now, just as an experiment, I'm going to try this out with ABS and without it. Now, I can't easily turn off the ABS, so what I'm going to do is just try the brake on the very edge of the ABS working, and if it does kick in, then I'll just have to release slightly. At least that's the plan. Now, I did say earlier that I was going to do this at 30 miles an hour, but at that speed, with just a back brake, this is what happens. So I'm just getting up to 30 miles an hour. I'm going to spot my marker on the left-hand side there, little white dot, hit the brakes, full on. ABS is kicking in, and even so, I've gone all the way to the edge of the underpass, just like that, and I've almost shot out of camera view. So that's no good at all. I'm going to have to revisit this and do it more at 25 miles an hour instead. So let's have a look at this, 25 miles an hour. It's the same run again. We're going to go along here, try and keep it at a constant 25. There's the marker, hit the brakes full as hard as I can with ABS, and it stops me pretty well. So we've got a reference point there. Let's have a look at that from a distance. You can see me coming into shot, and I stop just about by that last pillar. You can see I'm just past the last pillar. So let's try it again. This time I'm going to try and not use the ABS. So instead of just planting my foot, I'm going to do it carefully, progressive braking, as I would do as I ride normally. So there's the marker, hit the brakes, progressive. Oh, and actually that's not too bad at all. So let's have a look at that one. And actually, I've stopped at about the same distance, so I'm quite pleased with that. Now that's the old brake pads I'm using there. This is the point now at which I go away, get the new brake pads fitted. I come back once they're bedded in. And again, I'm doing 25 miles an hour, head down the road. I've got everything set up exactly as it was. There's the marker, hit the brakes, full ABS with the new pads on. Now that kicks in a lot easier. I barely had to touch the brakes to invoke the ABS, so let's see where I stopped. And you can see that's before the last pillar, so that's much better than last time. That's with the ABS. Now let's try it with me doing it, trying not to make the ABS come on. So last run now, we're going to go down here, hit the marker on the left, and then brake, try not to get the ABS to come in, and let's have a look at just where that stopped me. It's looking okay, to be honest. And there we are. Oh, yeah, I went a little bit further. I wasn't quite as good, but I did have to keep coming off the brake to stop the ABS from taking over. So that was all very unscientific. I mean, I don't know if I kept my speed that constant. My braking point was probably slightly different each time. You know, it's not a laboratory type exercise. But when I look at those results, I can definitely see that my new brake pads are stopping me more quickly than the old ones, but also that the ABS is kicking in much sooner. They're much more grippy than the old brake pads. So on reflection, what have I learnt from this whole exercise? Well, firstly, that swapping out your rear pads is fairly easy, and I'm sure if I did it again I could probably have the whole thing done in under 10 minutes. Secondly, I always thought ABS was an absolute must-have, but reading the manual, they're definitely a last resort rider aid, and you shouldn't ride any differently just because you have it. However, if you do find yourself needing to stop quickly in a straight line, they might just save you bacon. But I honestly don't think I'd be that bothered if I was buying a new bike and it didn't come with ABS, although to be fair there aren't many that don't. Now, a very experienced mate of mine who does a lot of track days said that if you ride correctly on the street you should never experience ABS, which I think he's right. But on the track it's a whole different story, so maybe that's just at least one good reason why you might want to consider it. So with my sintered brake pads now fitted front and rear, I should be able to stop on a sixpence, and hopefully I'll continue to never experience my ABS kicking in whilst I'm on the road, especially on the front wheel, which I haven't had the courage to try it yet. Or maybe it's time to start learning stoppies. Anyway folks, keep your chains oiled and I'll see you soon. See where those are seated, because they do have a habit of just falling out and you have to push them back in and make sure they're in the right position. So that bit was a little bit awkward. You fucking bastard.